All right. Well, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. I can see the chat, so happy to see some faces here. Happy to see some people. Let me get started. So, as Scott mentioned, I come from a product and community background. My goal is really to show the compound value of having both. These photos represent the context that I'm coming from, because I believe that the backstory explains a lot on how people think. So the first one on the left represents home. So I grew up in Asia and moved in the US by myself back in 2012. That really opened my eyes in terms of how people operate in different companies around the world and how communities are formed. 2 years after that, I landed my first job in the US as well. So that the second photo is where I spent 12 to 15 hours a day working and studying search and platform products, because I work for a company that does mobile app search. So I had no prior experience to that, but I survived and I came out as a mobile product lead that led me into working for companies like Amazon after. So at this point, it's mostly around user-centric practices and product management. But the third photo is when I started noticing that I'm spending more and more time with design and research, as well as our community members. So we are testing a lot of like physical devices, and we would put it out there and have testers look at it. And it's really hard to do hardware. So we work with them to collect feedback together. And I am fascinated by the number of hours that they're giving and helping to support the company and help us succeed. So that's where the community component started to kick in. I started looking at more and more building in public and working with people to make sure that the products become more successful. And towards the end, I said, wow, there's a lot of value in having both. And then the last part here is that you'll see me doing more and more work around Web3, especially DAOs, which is a very interesting extension of what it means to be giving ownership and contributing and collaborating with your members. So this is where I'm coming from. All right. By the way, feel free to say something on chat. I'll be looking at it every now and then to help answer any questions that you have. All right, let's go to the topic, build a community feedback loop. So I highlighted community here because in order to understand, I'm pretty sure that feedback loop is something that we know, whatever industry role or title we have, but not everyone works with community teams. So before we understand how to build a tight feedback loop, it's important to understand how community works, right? So let's start with the why, the what, and the how. So what are the elements of a community, or what makes it successful? There are so many different ways that you can describe a successful community. I picked just four, and I'm showing this on the screen. The first one is there's a sense of belonging. So people are deeply motivated to find meaning, mission, and belonging in a group, right? So we are social animals, and we want to be part of a pack. The second one is accessible. So effective communities are self-reinforcing, sticky, and adaptive. So it runs on its own if you have the right people doing different things. The third one is it's inclusive. So your members will participate and contribute if it's an inclusive environment that they can speak up and share their thoughts. And then finally, a very good community will have a lot of people offering something as opposed to asking something. And if you do that, if you can see that in a lot of your members, then you know that it's a good sign that your community is working. So I'm sharing all of these because if you understand that these are some of the elements that makes a community work, then you can use that as a way to get feedback later on. So this is setting the foundation for what you can do at some point in your product building. All right. I am going to move forward. And then again, feel free to drop in any questions that you have. So why bother? I think it's important. It's also important to understand, like, why do you have to deal with community? And then one of the most common questions that I get is, how is this different from like user-centric practices, right? So let me answer the second part later. But when you think about it, building products include all of these different stages, right? From ideation to launching to onboarding and engaging. So one of the most common growth method is the marketing-led growth. And you see this a lot being pushed out by people in the marketing side because they are top of the funnel. So once the product is out, then marketing can go out there as well and then talk to different customers to present the products that were built. Then over time, the product folks are pushing for product-led growth, right? They say that, oh, actually, it's very powerful to work with marketing and figure out a way to integrate the growth into the product experience as well. So that's where it kicked in. And then more recently, you'll hear more and more about community-led growth. There are two schools of thought. The first one is community as a mode, where you strengthen your product by having community after. But I do believe that actually your community can be part of all the process as well. And then I'll show this later. So it can be even as early as when you're forming the product, and even if you're not yet complete with it. So let me explain further. So there's this one back and forth that I had in the past, asking with the person asking, so what is the difference, right? Community versus an audience first approach. And I said a couple of things. If you are working and collecting feedback from your community, then you can accelerate product market fit because and you're getting a sense of what they want very early on. The second one is you can also collect quality feedback collectively, which will support the first one. And then finally, the more you bring in people in the journey, the more you build a loyal audience because they know your story, your origin story, and they understand the challenges and the successes that you've gone through to deliver your product. So at the end, I did say that connecting with your audience over time is the best way to win. All right. So here are some examples that are closer to what we do as software or technology leaders. If you're coming from different industry, I suggest you look at different products out there and their competitors. So this, because I work in the software tech industry, here are some examples that I have on the screen. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but if you're not, let me know and I'll explain further. But there are three screenshots here: Figma, Notion, and Duolingo. So Figma is a software that is primarily used by designers, but oftentimes shared across different teams. It allows you to share design and templates with others. Notion is a way for you to write your notes, and it's a productivity tool. You can connect with others who are sharing their project plans, task lists, and so forth. And finally, Duolingo is an app that allows you to apply language learnings and do a study to improve that by yourself or with others. So all of these products exist without community, but one of the strong reasons why they're so powerful is they are being shared and used across different community members, and the companies are opening the bridge between not just them and the users, but between community members to others as well. And that's where the feedback loop accelerates. So yeah, I mean, these are, if you're wondering how, what are the ways that community feedback is being executed here, we'll tackle that shortly. But I thought I'd share that there are different flavors to what community means, and this is one that where community enhances the product. So the product will exist, but the community is a multiplier effect. All right. So now let's go to the actual core of the session, right? How can you build a tight feedback loop? So let's go back to what I showed at the beginning, which is the product life cycle. So the takeaway here is bring them along the journey and consider your community as an extension of your team. So let's show one example here. The one that I'll give is a consumer product, mostly by Ryan Hoover, who's the product product hunt founder, and now also an investor. So when they were, and I hope you're familiar with this, it's a you can think of it as a marketplace to discover new products every day. And you can upvote and download and test products as they're launching it. So what's interesting is they were focusing on user acquisition before they had a product. So by the time that they launched, they already have a community of users that they acquired along the way. So this is consistent with what I said around bringing your customers along the journey. So first, this is some highlights of what they've done. First is they created an email list and encourage contributors to send links to their products every day. And that seeded the community and by inviting them, whether they're founders, investors, and startup friends, right? So by having that distribution list, you can ask questions, send survey, and just like get a pulse check of what's going on. And then after when they're doing this, or while they're doing this, they also had a beta program where they share the first custom software with or initial prototype with the first few hundred, right? And then that, of course, is a very strong example of how you can collect immediate feedback. If there's something that's not working or feature requests that they have, then you can collect that, or they collected that, and use that as an input to improve the product itself. And then doing that consistently over time allowed them to launch with tight feedback loop that fed into a product that people would want. All right, so that's that one. The first perspective is about bringing the customers along with the journey, right? Now let's talk about the interaction within different entities. So when you're doing product management practices, right, you have yourself and the users. You do one-to-one discussions, or at most like focus group discussions where you have 5 to 10 people, and you do it in silo, right? But when you have a community, this is how it looks like. So it's you have the community member, and then you have another community member, right? So you can see 3 pathways. The interaction that happens is this. One is you interacting with your community member. So the way you collect feedback is first you provide status updates and information on existing and future products. What are you up to? And depending on your comfort, you may even be willing to share some of the designs or project plans or rewards that you're planning to give, right? So I also mentioned that the information includes roadmap, release notes, and upcoming events. So whatever you want to share, this is the most common way to send signal and then ask for feedback afterwards. The other thing that happens, this is one example of what that looks like. So when I was working with a CAM product before, one of the things that we would often do is go to our Facebook group and then put a poll and ask people, hey, which fund do you prefer? So if you can see, if you see the numbers here, there's like 205 people who are posting comments around this one question. And we're not doing that via survey, or we're not doing that one-to-one. We're putting it out in public and then letting them have a dialogue. And then we step back and listen and watch to what they're saying. So a very good way to collect that feedback and have that more organic conversation with them. The second one is the other way around. So now that you've sent out your questions, now that you sent out that questions, you can also have the other way, right? You have the community members talking to you. So if you create a space where they can provide feedback and participate, then you can have a better sense of what they want. So for example, one way of doing it is creating a public wish list in a public poll, as I mentioned earlier, or even a public survey. So let's go to the first one. If you have a site or a forum, what you can do is like ask questions there, show what you're planning to do, and then wait and see what people would think. Now, sometimes what's interesting here is one customer, like there's so many customer demand, as you know, as a product user, product manager. So what's interesting is when I was doing this in my previous companies, if we have like something on the backlog that we cannot deliver, one person will one customer might say, why is this taking so long? And this should be a simple change of a button, right? But then if the other people know the story behind why you're not doing it, they can actually step in to explain what's going on. So it's interesting because then you can see the two sides of two sides of the coin, and then you can evaluate how you want to move forward. And then if you participate in that as well, then you can open that conversation and feedback loop. So I think I have an example here. So this is one example of the first part where this customer, which I didn't include the name of, is giving some feedback around the mobile app, right? So there is a home screen and you see a lot of this feature, and the person said it would be cool to have toggles, values, and so forth. What's interesting about this example is that what you see on the screen is not the product that we're building when I was there. The visual that you see is something that this customer created for us to explain what his request was. So it's super interesting to see how some customers are super passionate about what you do, that they're willing to go beyond, above and beyond, just to help you improve the product for them and for others. And then after this, by the way, we didn't end up launching the exact UI because another customer said, actually, this might work for you, but not for me because my use case is different. So, and then more people chimed in. And at the end, we did thank the person and say, hey, this is a great mock that you created. We understand the perspective that you're coming from. While we cannot address this particular case, we have other solutions that you might like. And then we use that as feedback that we then presented later during the future sprints. All right. Thanks for sending the link, Scott. I saw that you did say that you launched a few things on product hunt and a couple of things where you are communicating with community. And yeah, I am not surprised because as someone coming from a product community background, like this is something that comes more naturally for us. Cool, and you're welcome, Ashley, for the inputs that I've sent that I've shared so far. All right, now we focus on community member to you and vice versa. Now let's go to the third pathway. So I mentioned three pathways at the start, and this is the last one. So let me see. I think I did mention earlier that you can encourage interaction between members to discuss pros and cons of different designs and implementations, right? One other thing that can happen is as they are doing their back and forth interaction, ideas come out better. And then by the end of a thread or a post, then you can see ideas that weren't surfaced at the start. And that idea would not have been possible if they didn't go through that conversation. So again, why is this relevant? Because this feeds back into that premise that if you are doing your building along with your community, then you are tightening that loop and making it faster. And not only that, you're also bringing in you're also helping create new ideas on the fly. All right. So that's the second part of the feedback loop strategy from the lens of what does it look like from the different entity interactions. Now, let's go to the third one. What are the different programs or activities that you can do to strengthen the feedback loop? There's a few things here that I've added. One is early access programs. So I hope you've participated in some of them. If you have, if you can recall a few in mind that you thought was a great example of what early access means, please drop in on the chat. I would love to see or even check it out if it's ongoing. So early access programs, let your community be the first to receive and enjoy your products. You can create dedicated forum distribution list for your members, and hopefully you will allow them to connect with fellow backers and get exclusive updates, right? So Kickstarter programs are very good at this, where they are showing what's happening, and then you pledge in different tiers. And if you extend that and have a room for people to share their feedback to you, even though they still don't have the product, that's a good way to have that feedback flowing. The second one is beta program. So not a subset of that early access people or other segments that is not interested in early access might be part of this beta program. So so in short, it can be the same or different people. This will allow community to join your efforts as you're building it. For example, I mean, this is very common actually when you're downloading an app or building a site. The difference is the beta program stage is more forgiving, because you're putting a disclaimer that, hey, this product is not done. This is a beta state, so expect some bugs, and sometimes we need your help to surface that, especially if this is something that is used across like different platforms or different devices, because when you put it on in the wild, that's where you really see how the product operates in the true environment, right? You can only do so much testing it internally. So putting it out there, and then again, I'll say this over and over again, just like have that dialogue and let people post. Don't be afraid for them to show the world what your what improvements you can do or what's missing, right? Because you want to catch this early on in the beta stage, as opposed to when you publish it or launch it to a wider audience, because that mistake will be much more costly when it happens later. And finally, the one that I have here is ambassador program. So ambassadors act as cheerleaders to your brand. And you can think of this as, this is not in order. So I'd say from a product lifecycle perspective, the beta program comes first, and then the early access program comes next. And then once you have products, then the ambassador program can help you amplify that, right? So they are cheerleaders for your brand and can represent the culture of your company to the public. Now, you can do it in different ways. You can open an application for formally for people to join a program, or what's even better is like you can observe and work with your community marketing or even support teams to see if there are some people in the community who'd be a good advocate as part of this group, right? And if you do that, what that means is you're actually bringing them closer to your project team, and then allowing yourself to be more open and transparent to asking them questions around what they think about the product, your roadmap, and what are their suggestions to improve. Not in this case, sometimes you just don't ask for feedback around the product. You will ask feedback around, what do you think of our customer support service, or what do you think about our shipping pricing? It becomes deeper and deeper into how you run as a company, as opposed to just asking for feedback around your app, right? So yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. I would love to see some questions towards the end, but in summary, these are some of the measures that you can put in place, and this can run in different cycles or different stages along your product development. But the point is, you're doing this to find more and more ways to open up the conversation between yourself and your customers. All right, we are coming close to an end. I can see Scott turning on his screen, but the final thing that I would say is, I think more and more you'll see that you are very limited if you operate just within your immediate project team, right? It's getting really, really competitive and hard to get a sense and pulse of what people want. So if you are practicing this across the board, whether it's through different product lifecycle perspective, looking at different human interaction, as well as creating programs that are formal to allow and invite people to participate, then you are building all these different pathways that will allow you to be successful. Because at the end, I love saying this: competitors can copy your product, but they cannot copy your community. And getting feedback from your community is going to be key to your success. With that, I end my presentation. We can go to Q&A. How did I do on time?
Awesome. That was great, Mark. That was awesome. That was really great. Super interesting. I did a lot of commonalities, obviously, between the work we're doing here in our community and product board, but also some of my own experiences in the past. And great to hear the different ideas and stuff that's shared. You talked, I want to come back just before we jump into the Q&A, and we'll leave a little bit of time for people to ask questions and things like that. Then I'll paraphrase those out. But I want to start with maybe one of my own questions, and that's, I think you had a couple slides back on sort of the order of this with beta programs, an early sort of adopter kind of one, and a few other pieces that were part of that. And I know you talked about that order being really integral. Do you find that order might change too, depending on like the maturity of a company and their product practices? Have you seen kind of like differences in how they might have approached that based on the maturity curve?
Yeah. So give me a sec here, if I may. I just want to make
sure
that I can share my screen if I have to. So one moment.
Okay, no problem.
All right. Okay, I'm back. So the answer is yes. What I noticed is more established companies or products will have a very thorough set of benefits or perks that they can offer the customers, right? And then the value prop is often clear the later stage the product is, because you have a sense of what customers want, and you have probably a portfolio of different features that you can offer. That is very different from like a very early startup, right? Sometimes you don't have anything to offer, so it's really hard to create a program unless you team up with other companies, or you get creative into what you want to offer. So for example, it can be as far out there as like creating a swag or a shirt or merchandise, just because you have nothing else to offer, and that's fine. Like your goal is really just to open that connection with your members. But yeah, the difference is the level and breadth of benefits and perks that you offer.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. And I see John White asked a question in our Q&A, maybe that kind of piggybacks on this. So maybe I'll just add that one as kind of the first one to bring into this. But what's the clear distinction between an early access program and a beta program, and which one should come first?
Sure, I'll answer this, and Scott, I'd love for you to chime in. But from my perspective, early access program can be done. So the way I've done this in the past is mostly the beta program is when the product is not polished. So there's a component there that you're testing it. Early access is just like giving the products earlier compared to other people. Maybe you have limited inventory, or maybe it's another gate in between beta and a full launch. So again, the terminologies might vary, and different companies might execute it differently. But in my perspective, it's coming closer and closer to a point where the product is 100% complete, and hopefully not a lot of bugs.
Yeah, like on our side, like I know we used early access programs in the early stage of product board, like when we were a much smaller company than we are today. But we used that, a lot to kind of give early, and like to your point, an early benefit to people that were super engaged in the product and wanting to derive value and provide more feedback to us. And we leveraged the community to give them that early access to new capabilities. So it might have been like, I think of like my experience when I was on the other side of this as a customer of product board, it was, maybe access to a new piece of functionality before everyone else got access to it so that we could try it out. So it was a mix of almost early access and beta in some ways for us, but also some cases it was more of like, here's an early access in a way to gather feedback in a way that we knew it was going to be broken. There was no expectations maybe that it was perfect. We weren't expecting fully functional capabilities, and we were doing this to like ideate in a large degree between product board and the customer, essentially on that side. And then for us, I know like today we run beta programs, but our beta programs too are also somewhat plan dependent. And so depending on the plan that you have and the access that you have inside our product, you may or may not be suitable to even join a beta programs. And so beta programs become, for us, in a lot of cases, we've done a lot of the pre-discovery. We thought about the actual problem space. We've spent time probably talking to a lot of those customers And now we're inviting them in to kind of, come along with the final solution design, and kind of see the final product come to market before it actually does. And then we've also got some other versions of early access too that we do, like labs. We've got a labs environment in our product today, and so that's a great way for us sometimes to turn on a capability or give you the ability as an individual to turn that capability on and experience something that we're thinking about in the product, but we haven't fully kind of baked. And that gives us a ton of learning that we can then eventually think about turning into final product, which we might beta later on and do those kinds of things. And so, yeah, it's super, super interesting to see how people, like, the language even is slightly different between some people's programs. I think the key part here is giving access to customers early enough, bringing them along in the problem space discovery, and also bringing them along in the solution space discovery before you go live with a product, which means you've got two parts. You've got a product that's probably built better, that actually addresses all the user needs. And then the last part of it is you probably have a group of advocates who essentially become your ambassadors at the end and telling people about this great capability and feature, or advocating for it in your community.
Yeah, Scott.
Yeah, that's really cool.
I would like to add, I like a couple of keywords that you mentioned earlier. Two of them is like solution design, or something about the solution space, right? So when
the problem space and solution space, yeah.
Correct. So when like for me, the beta, the beta keyword is actually also a signal that you are co-building something with the company. So there's a lot of like back and forth around improving the product. Whereas the early access, I noticed that a lot of folks running promotions and marketing I really love this, because it's a way for them to reduce price, run promotions, bundle stuff. So like, again, you can use whatever term you want, but the point is you can also approach it differently, and then different teams can contribute to a certain program in a certain manner.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's really awesome. I'm going to jump some more questions. Ashley had asked here how you establish the guideposts for your community, things like our core values. Is that based on the company mission or something different? Maybe you want to answer. I don't know if you want to have some thoughts on that one. I've got some thoughts I can contribute there too.
Yeah, let's please do. Let's both respond to this. I'm glad that you answered this. You asked this question because a company would always have their mission, vision, but you don't often hear sub teams having it. But for us, we actually created a separate community vision and mission that lines up to that. So I'd say whatever we're doing in the community should be contributing to that overarching goal. And then we just look into what kind of culture we want to build, and that feeds into the community core values.
Yeah,
Scott,
definitely.
what do you have? What did you do here?
Yeah, same kind of thing. We've got a mission and vision around our community. We also have, and we leveraged quite a bit out of David Spinks's book, building, what is it? Sorry, I always remember get the wrong title. It's this one here, The Business of Belonging. If you haven't read it, it's a really good book on community building. But he has a framework in there called Spaces, which basically helps you focus and sort of align on the focus of your community, ultimately the core purpose of what it's there to do. And I think that can open up some interesting conversations with your team and within your company. I think the key part really on a value statement side around community is two parts. Is like, what are the values you want to build for your organization, and what are the values you want to build for your community members? And I think it's really important to consider both sides of that coin as you begin to shape and sort of talk about the community and the values that you want to uphold on that side. I'm going to jump to another. Ashley's full of questions today, which is fantastic to see. What's the decision-making process after receiving feedback? So I think this is an interesting one. We get a lot of feedback through these kinds of different programs. What do you do with it when you got it? How do you start processing it and assembling it?
Yeah, let me give one. So I'd say the process is such a big word, but what ends up happening is it's very similar, right? You look at the feedback and evaluate them based on the factor that matters to your company. May it be user satisfaction, user growth, or even revenue contribution. And sometimes you would factor in technical complexity, right? So you have this criteria, which PMs love. Like you have to look at the different components, and then you look at these collective inputs, and then just map it and see what bubbles on top. And then if you're asking for the mechanics of how that happens, we actually have upvotes. Like if you want to see actual number to see what people are requesting the most. And then we use that as a dialogue internally in the company to have a conversation of whether we should go with the first one, even though it's super complex, or should we go with like the fifth one on the list that is easier to ship out, even though it's not as high as the first one. So use that as a weapon or as a conversation piece. And like with any project, like with any project team meeting, you just need to have that back and forth within your team. But now you're empowered with a large data set of examples, right? And what people are saying. So that actually makes it, like some people say it's more confusing. To me, it's actually better, because then you can see firsthand what customers are saying, as opposed to having this PM to PM conversation, right? So that's how we do it.
Yeah, definitely. And I know like for us, like obviously our software product board is built for exactly this. So I mean, much like you talked about these sort of criteria, we leverage what we call those drivers inside product board. They can be ways in which you can prioritize and make decisions about what to build. But we also, take that feedback that you're gathering and allow you to turn that into something quantitative in the user impact score that helps you make decisions about what to build a little more effectively. And so you can focus here on both your target audience, the problem that you need to solve, the important to your business, the cost and the effort associated with producing that, and it essentially help to essentially come to that decision on what's actually most important to go and build. I know a lot of UX people as well too, just love good old Post-it notes. I mean, this could be as simple as putting that feedback up, sorting and organizing it, doing a little bit of affinity mapping too on that side. So it doesn't have to be super, high tech. It simply just needs the inputs and the conversation around it. I'm going to jump to another question. This one from Gabriella. What will be a method way to recruit ambassadors?
Oh, I've seen this in many ways. Again, it depends on the product. Sometimes if you are targeting like younger audience, you can go to campuses, partner with organizations, and just like run the events with these folks. Or you can put it on your website as a more structured way, and then include links into your newsletters. I think to me the most effective way is to go back into your community and see who are the most active ones, because they're a very good indicator that these people are willing to go extra mile to help you, and then recognizing them officially by giving them this more authoritative role or more special role actually is a good way to amplify their contribution or reward them for what they're doing, which is exactly what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to like look at people and then thank them, and this is one way of doing that. So to me, my go-to strategy is look at your different community groups, message them directly, and see hey, if they want to take extra time to step up and do this role.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great answer. Yeah, I think the ambassador part too is a bit of a loaded word, because there's like ambassadors in the context of a community itself, and then there's ambassadors for your product. And I don't know necessarily if Gabriella's question's kind of about either side, but to use an example in our context, we have ambassadors for our community, and we have 4 right now. We have an application process. And that's how we essentially recruit some of our ambassadors. But we also, much like Mark talked about, is do that reach out based on who's engaged, who's contributing to the community, people that we think would be good. We might reach out to them and involve them in that sort of activity. On the product side, for us, we leverage, again, product board quite intensively on that side. So the nice thing about the feedback that we've got coming in is we know who's provided that feedback. And so that group of people can actually be our initial group of ambassadors that we can work with and reach out to. And often they're intrinsically motivated because they shared feedback in the first place, about the feature that we're going to go and build, about the problem we're trying to solve for. And so I definitely encourage you as well to take a look at how you can, relate this back to the source of the feedback. Because ultimately, if they're taking the time out of their day to share feedback, it's ultimately the most important for you to recruit with them and start there. And I think we got one last question here before we wrap up, and that's from Ashley. Oh, wait, we got some more coming in too. That's good. How do you use emotional intelligence in discussing feedback with your internal teams?
Thanks for this question, Ashley. So emotional intelligence is such a big word, but let me try to answer this. So the first thing that came to mind was how do we use that to influence other teams and to just show what people want? The answer is we use it a lot because it's actually sometimes funny because one screenshot and anecdote coming from a customer like breaks the tie and bring in like gives us buy-in from stakeholders as opposed to like whatever calculations you do on a spreadsheet. Because like at the end of the day, like the community folks or customer support folks or user research folks are the one closest people. So like having that data point is something that we would bring in during brainstorming or decision-making process, or sometimes even like project planning if it's ideation stage, because like you can see and bring in customers because they're not there in your office, right? You are responsible to bring in those insights directly to your conversation. So yes, we use it. We put screenshots, we put it in our docs, we include them in different proposals. We tally them if we have that tool to make sure that we are giving them a voice.
That's really good. I'm going to put a little resource just in here too for you, Ashley, that might be interesting, as our Dangerous Animals of Product Management ebook, which is really good, which also gives you a little bit of resources on how to deal with each of these different people, maybe where you're running into those challenging roadblocks or problems, some great techniques and things like that in there that might be helpful on that side. And we got one last question in here. After recruiting your ambassadors and product evangelists, how do you manage and engage them? What tools do you use, etc.?
Yeah, by the way, Scott, I love that you have a link for every question. So feel free to drop a link if you've written something about this. But what we do is we nothing, like sometimes nothing actually changes if it's more fun, informal, like if it's a smaller company, because you go to where they are and then you give them updates. And if they're already again, this is more of the community ambassador aspect, which happens to be a subset of your most likely they are a subset of your product ambassadors. Then they already know they already are in touch with you, so we just keep that going. But however, what you can do is bring in different ambassadors, so that they can meet together, right? And they have a special place. So different ways. Some people love just like having a group in social or whatever in-house solution that you have. And then every quarter we would actually, like in past startups, every quarter we would actually do like a meet and greet between these ambassadors in our team, and then we just like use an hour, grab drinks together, but they do most of the talking. So that actually, even though it only happens like 4 times a year, is super powerful because they get to meet, they get to interact with not just the PMs or the community managers, but also the leadership team, which is always exciting for them. They get to ask really tough questions. So yeah, that's one way to do it. Just bring people via Zoom once in a while.
Yeah, that's a perfect answer. It's exactly a great way to do it for sure. We do similar things as well on our side. I mean, kind of maybe to extend that out a little bit is like with our community ambassadors, we get together quarterly. We also have, again, like a private group where we can sort of have those conversations and chats, get feedback from them. That's a really great place. But this can start really simple on the tool set side too. Like, again, this doesn't have to be complex. This can be creating a channel in your Slack workspace and inviting those people into that channel and giving them a way which they can share their feedback or have those conversations with you in a closer proximity. It doesn't have to be going out investing in big, huge production and tools and processes and stuff like that. You can adapt as you go through that process as well. So I think remaining flexible is a really important part of this as you go through this journey. I think that's about all we've got for today. Mark, I want to say a big thank you. Again, it was like super interesting to have the conversation and hear some of the stuff today. I'm just going to punch over to a few more slides just to close us out and invite everybody to join our post-event topic. We will add this to the event section within our community, our product makers community. You can share any comments or additional questions that you have that we weren't able to get to today, or ones that come up afterwards as you're kind of thinking through this topic. And we'll also attach to that event, as well as we mentioned, the recordings, kind of slides and materials essentially afterwards, so you have access to those. Just as a couple reminders about events that we do have coming up, we've got Ethan Butte speaking about putting the messenger back into the message. And this is a really interesting conversation. Product managers have a lot of challenges in communicating with other team members and effectively, storytelling about their their problem space and their solution space in some cases. And so Ethan's going to be sharing some really great inputs from his fantastic book on this topic. Encourage you all to definitely join us for that particular event. And then we have Jeff Gottlieb coming as well in January. He's going to be doing an AMA on Lean UX. This should be a really exciting and interesting topic. Lean UX has now been around for about 20 years. And they just published recently the 3rd edition of the book, which is super exciting. And we got a lot more coming in 2022 as well. And if anybody here on the call is interested in being a product maker speaker, you can learn more on our community site as well. We're more than interested in involving others from the product community or from the community or whatever it might be that has an intersection here with people building product to share their thoughts and their ideas and experiences. And with that, thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. And Mark, again, thanks very much for all the great presentation.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, everyone.
All right, take care.